context and the final verse in the text, verse 19. Jesse, would you start us in verse 1? Let's go around the table. After Steve, we'll go to Nick, and then back to me. We'll have to read a few times to get through.
We're going to get there. We're doing a little chapter.
We'll just go to verse 19.
And he looked up and saw the rich men casting their gifts into the treasury.
And he saw also a certain poor widow casting the balance together 2 mites.
And he said, of the truth I say unto you, that this poor widow had cast in more than they all.
For all these out of their abundance cast in unto the offers of God, but she of her penury hath cast in all the living that she had.
And as some spake of the temple, how it was adorned with goodly stones and gifts, he said,
As for these things which you behold, the days will come in which there shall not be left one stone upon another, that shall not be thrown down.
Teacher, they asked, when will these things happen? And what will be the sign that they are about to take place?
And he said, take heed that you be not deceived. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ. And the time draweth near. Go ye not therefore after them.
So when you shall hear,
So Nick, we totally forgot Nick. Nick, you want to pick it up on verse 9?
Yeah, sure. No problem. When you hear of wars and disturbances, do not be terrified, for these things must take place first, but the end does not follow immediately.
then said he unto them, nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom.
And great earthquakes shall be diverse places, and famine, and
Pestilences.
and fearful sights and great signs shall there be in heaven.
But before all these, they shall lay their hands on you and persecute you, delivering you up to the synagogues and into prisons, being brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake.
They shall turn to you for testimony.
Settle it therefore in your hearts, not to meditate before what ye shall answer.
For I will give you a mouth and wisdom, which all your adversaries shall not be able to gainsay nor resist.
You will be betrayed even by the parents, brothers, relatives, and friends, and they will put some of you to death.
Ye shall be hated of all men for my name's sake.
Verse 18, so yet not a hair of your head will perish.
In your patience possess ye your soul.
All right, let's stop there. All right, let's focus on verse 19, that last verse there in the passage. In your patience possess your souls. And I want to look closely at the word patience, talk about specifically your patience. Now, let's start by considering what does this mean, your patience? I think we're going to discover that there's a little different meaning than what we might initially think here. As I was studying through the New Testament I discovered that there are two primary words for patience as far as Greek words behind the English word, and they have a different meaning. The first one, if I'm pronouncing this correctly, macrothumio, which means long-spirited. So macro, large or long, thumio deals with the spirit. That's the typical meaning of patience. We think about somebody's patient, long-spirited, long-tempered. It takes a lot to really get them upset. That's kind of the meaning of the first word. Matthew chapter 18 is a parable of the unforgiving servant, and we find that word used there as far as he has a great debt to pay. He begs mercy from the king. Please be patient with me. That's kind of the idea is, just give me some time, and that's the first one. But the second one here, and this is the more common word for patience in the New Testament, is the one found in our reading this morning. And it's the Greek word hupomone, which is the idea of cheerful endurance. You might want to mark that down. What does this mean? The word patience there in verse 19, it doesn't mean long-tempered or long-suffering, long-spirited. It's the idea of cheerful enduring. So a little different meaning. And I think that both those words are important. We're enduring, but we're also doing it cheerfully. God is not just concerned with what we do, but how we do it. And already in our discussion this morning through the prayer time, we're going through some things, and we know people that are going through things. So we need to cheerfully endure those things. Our Wednesday night study through the book of Hebrews has led us to Hebrews chapter 12. In verse 1, we're told to run the race with patience. Let's run the race with patience, and that's cheerful endurance. So it's important for us that we would understand from the words of Christ here that we need to cheerfully endure in life. Now, I've not read this book, but I thought it was a great illustration for patience as far as the definition here in Luke 1:1. Jay Sowell has written a book called Fan the Flame. And in the book, he talks about how the Greeks had a race in their Olympic Games that was rather unique. The winner was not determined by who finished first. It was the person that finished with their torch still lit. So there had to be a caution as you're running that you don't extinguish the flame. Finish first without your torch lit, it didn't mean anything. And I think there's a great illustration. Stowell says, I want to run all the way with the flame of my torch still lit for God. So we're enduring, but we're doing it with joy. And we've got the cheerfulness that God wants us to have as well. And we know people, we've met people that we feel like the flame has kind of gone out. And, you know, I guess until we've walked in that person's steps, we don't know what they're going through and what's caused them to lose their joy. But I had a conversation with somebody in ministry recently, and I could tell that they still had their mission in mind, but the joy wasn't there. And I don't know if they've gotten discouraged by things. I don't really know what's happening. Yeah, until you've been in that person's shoes, you can't really criticize. But I can just tell the mission's still there, you're enduring, but the cheer is gone. And I think a challenge for all of us. When Jesus says, in your patience, this is a command, in your patience possession your souls, he's saying, keep enduring and keep your joy as you do it. Now, I want to answer then a second question. This comes from the context here. I want to move along. Point 3 is where we're talking about possessing your souls. What does that mean? But why is it important for us to be patient, to cheerfully endure? The context of the passage begins in chapter 21. Jesus is in the temple, and he's observing the offerings of people there in the temple. And there's a lot that can be learned from that God sees our gifts, and it's not really the size of our gift that impresses God. I was teaching the kids at BBS from 1 Corinthians chapter 3, where it says that our work should be tried by what sort they are. So God's not impressed with size, he's impressed with sort. And here you have rich people casting in what we would see as large gifts, and then this poor widow casting in just 2 mites. A mite there is not an insect, if you're wondering. A mite there is 1/5 of a penny. That's the amount of a mite. So not much. But Jesus said that she had cast in more than they all. Our giving is not based, or I guess I should say the size of our giving is not based on the amount. It's the amount in relation to what we have. And this woman gave everything that she had, and Jesus noted that. And as they're in the temple, then some of his disciples make comments about the temple and how it's adorned, and the things that impress us rarely impress God. He wasn't impressed by the goodly stones and the gifts and things, but he began to give a prophecy in verse 6 about how the temple would be thrown down, and this was fulfilled in 70 AD. When Titus attacked the city, burned the temple, and the gold melted down into the foundation stones, and people tore the stones apart to get the gold out. It was fulfilled as Jesus prophesied in verse 6. In verse 7, they asked him for a sign. And Jesus followed the question in verse 7 by giving them some specific signs related to the end of the age. And there's really a double fulfillment here. Some of these things would happen before Jerusalem was attacked there by Titus, but also some of these things are yet to be fulfilled or being fulfilled now. And I want to point out, starting in verse 8, well, I believe there are 3 reasons why it's important for us to patiently endure with cheerfulness. First off, in verse 8, notice the verse that was read already. He says this: take heed that you be not deceived. So the first reason why we need to cheerfully endure, is because there's much deception in our world today. This deception was then, this deception is now. He said there's many that will come saying, "I'm Christ." And he says, the time draweth near, go ye not therefore after them. So there's much deception. So we need to endure. We cannot be sidetracked. The word deceive means to roam. I think about the time that I spent on the buffalo farm, and there's a song about where the buffalo roam, and they did roam some when we were there. Different times they got out, and getting buffalo back in was very challenging because they just kind of go where they want to go. But they would just roam, and there are people that are roaming. They're not staying on track. They're not enduring in the truth. And Jesus warned about this. Any of us can be deceived. Better Christians than us have been deceived by people that claim the name of Christ. There's a lot of this social media and YouTube ministries and guys that are very convincing and they sound good. Just be careful. He said, take heed. So when he says in verse 19, in your patience, possession of your soul, so saying, this is very important because as the age continues, there will be more and more deception. And so we have to know that. I think that's the first reason why it's important to emphasize patience. Then look at verse 9. It says, when you shall hear wars, and mark this next word in commotions. The word commotions there. The word commotion is the idea of instability or disturbances, confusion, and translated tumults in other places, the ups and downs. You're going to hear wars. We hear wars often even today. Commotions. Be not terrified. For these things must first come to pass, but the end is not by and by. Then he said in them, nation shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom, and great earthquakes shall be in divers places, and famines and pestilences, and fearful sights, and great signs shall there be from heaven. So there are much commotion, much deception, much commotion, and we're hearing about things like this even today, that there's constantly things that are promoted and things that are emphasized, and these things can cause us to be alarmed and be fearful. And verse 11 talks about that, be not terrified. So we need to be patient, we need to cheerfully endure. And this is important for us to project this to the next generation. Our kids pick up on things. So, as we're talking about world events and current events, things are going on, let's make sure we're always emphasizing God's in control. This is part of God's plan. Let's not project fear to those around us. We need to be filled with that cheerful endurance, even through those commotions of life. Now, let me bring you to the last one here. In verse 12, he says, but before all these, they shall lay their hands on you and persecute you, delivering you up to the synagogues and into prisons, being brought before kings and rulers for my name's sake. And they shall turn to you for a testimony. Settle it therefore in your hearts, not to meditate before what you shall answer. For I will give you a mouth and wisdom. I've been claiming that phrase some too, and praying that for others. God's the one that gives us a mouth, and God gives us wisdom. When we're in a difficult spot, God can give us the words that we need to speak, which all your adversaries shall not be able to gainsay nor resist. And ye shall be betrayed both by parents and brethren, kinsfolks and friends. And some of you shall they cause to be put to death. You shall be hated of all men my name's sake, but there shall not an hair of your head perish. So there's much persecution in our world as well. Why is patience so important? Because there's much persecution. And some of this stuff is very difficult. And we know that most of Jesus' disciples, they were martyred and they went through these things. And as things wax worse and worse, we may face some of this persecution ourselves. So patience is important. Admiral Judson was a missionary many, many years ago to Burma, modern day Myanmar. And he went through a lot of physical persecution in his ministry there. And one situation that stands out in my mind is they say Judson, he was in prison there in Burma. He was tied to a bamboo pole, and another prisoner kind of was stopping him and kind of mocking him, and basically said, what now of the prospects of God saving the heathen, and what about all these things that you talked about? And he just kind of smiled at this fellow prisoner and said, the future is as bright as the promises of God. And there's a man that understood patience, cheerful endurance. And we may go through some things, maybe not quite like this, but we all have a cross to bear. Some of those things have been mentioned already in the third time. There's things that are hard for us. There's things that are difficult. And what's our spirit through that? Are we persevering? Are we doing the right spirit? So there's a lot of deception. There's a lot of commotion in life. There's a lot of persecution in life. And that's why Jesus says, in your patience, possess your souls. You need of patience. That Greek word, hupomeno, hupo means to remain under. So you'll find that prefix a lot with other Greek words, hupo. It's staying under. When you want to run and you want to flee, I'm going to stay under this thing. I'm going to stay in this thing because this is where God has put me. Now, the last question I think is very important as well. How is this possible? How can we cheerfully endure when things fall apart, when things don't go our way, when we're on plan B, when it's not what we had in our minds? How do we do this? I was thinking about even parenting, we talk about we're at different stages of parenting. I realize that. Larry has adult children and grandkids. You guys have, you're transitioning, your kids are becoming adults, you're moving in different stages. I've got kids moving into teens. Andrew's got, younger ones, a brand new baby. So we're all different stages when it comes to parenting. But there's times when it's like, man, I'm losing my joy in this. And it's hard to be patient and cheerfully endure. But God's called us to that, and we have to stay at it. How do you have cheerful endurance? Go ahead.
2 Corinthians 12:9, and he said, my grace is sufficient for thee. My strength is made perfect in you.
Yeah.
That's rather therefore. So I rather glory in your my infirmities than the power of Christ.
I like the verse. I love that verse. I have it it's in the background. My wife made this card for me just a couple Christmases ago, and I explained that so many times. There's times where I'm preaching and feeling the resistance of the enemy, and I'll just kind of, if you ever see it, that's what I'm doing. I'll kind of pull this card out, just put it right there in the pulpit, and helps you get through. God's grace is sufficient, more than enough. That's what the word sufficient means. So there's no trial, there's no difficulty, no commotion, no persecution, no deception that's so great that God's grace can get you through that. So it's not just me trying to be strong in me. It's we gotta have God's grace to get through it.
I think also we have to remember to stay on mission, because a lot of times during the bumps, it's the emotion that gets us. And if we maintain our focus on the mission, I think that helps us to see that God's going to get us through. And I like verses 14 and 15. Settle it therefore in your hearts, not to meditate before what you shall answer. For I will give you a mouth, and wisdom. Right? So that to me, those words hit me today. Settle it therefore in your hearts. Right? Don't let your heart be blown over here and blown over there. I'll give you the words and the wisdom. Right? So when it gets tough, bumpy, whatever, God still got you, right? Yeah. And you can be settled in your heart, even though the storm is around. I love that. I love that.
And then when we're close with
I think it's easier said than done though, because most of us are planners and we like to prepare. This is my worst nightmare right here. Is last Saturday it kind of happened to me. I couldn't find my notes, but I'll have nightmares about, it's like, it's 10:59 Sunday morning. I walked up and I have nothing. Like I have nothing, to say. Like that feeling of being unprepared is horrible. But that's really what he's saying is, you got to rely on me because you're facing some things you never faced before, and you can't prepare for some of these things. You just have to trust the Lord. He's going to get you through. He can show you what to say and how to respond.
If you look at war and pestilence, those things are so far out of our control, right? And we like to have the control, or at least think we have the control over our little kingdom. And it's God that's in control anyway. He's the one that allowed the coronavirus. He's the one that allowed the planes to fly into the buildings. He's the one that allows these things to happen. And he's still in charge. We're still on the winning team. It's already settled, right? And so we get all about it because it's the emotion of the moment, but it's already taken care of, right? And we can patiently do it. That's good.
I think he does that to make us stronger, because we came across a month when they said, oh, God got us through the last one, and it was rougher than this one.
Interesting, the word pestilence is there, refers to diseases or plagues, and how important for us when whatever happens, we can point out to our kids, you know what, Jesus said this was going to happen. This is part of God's plan. With the war in Ukraine, God said there's going to be wars. And I think that gives a peace to these young hearts and into our hearts that it's all part of God's plan. So we really shouldn't be surprised. This is part of the end of the age, is these things will happen. And going back to Brian's point, just being settled in it and letting the Lord give us the words and the wisdom on how to respond. And that leads into verse 19, because we got to ponder this for a moment here. In your patience, possess your souls. I think this is the how, but we got to go figure this out. What does that mean? It doesn't just say, be patient, but he says, in your patience, what does it mean to possess your soul? It's pretty deep. I don't think it is, but what does it mean to possess your soul? Are we looking for a brief definition over there?
Yeah, I got one. It's not to get or to acquire, obtain, provide or purchase.
I think, Jesse, what did you say, Jesse? Control. Yeah, I think it really is just the idea of being in control of your soul, if you like, be poetic there. Your soul. So we have three parts, right? What's the three parts that we have? We're made in the image of God, and we have three parts. Intellect, emotion, and will are all within the soul. What's the other two parts? Body and spirit. And God's order, according to 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verse 23, is spirit. That's where we worship God. Before we get saved, our spirit is dead. But we get saved, it's brought to life, and it's through our spirit that we connect with God and worship God. The soul is the inner man. As Jesse said, that's your intellect, that's your emotion, that's your will. It's who you are on the inside. Your soul is eternal. It's the eternal part of you that will live forever. When God made Adam, he made him a living soul, an eternal soul. And then there's the body. Now, isn't it interesting how the world reverses the order? And they always say body, soul, and spirit, but that's It's not God's order, that's the world's order, and so much emphasis is placed on the body. And there's certainly a balance that we need to steward our health. But the body, you can do everything you want to, but this body is temporary. And this body will pass. And as Nick mentioned, talking about the funeral today reminds us that life's temporary. But we think about our soul, intellect, emotion, and will. And specifically emotion, I think that's what is mentioned here, that when we think of deception and we think of the commotions and the persecution, it can work up our emotions. God's made us emotional people, and we have feelings, but those emotions and feelings are not to control us. Larry's pointing to himself. It's good. It's good to feel. No, it's good to be emotional. It's that those are gifts from God. However, we have to keep those things in check, and we can't allow our emotions to control us. We have to control our emotions. So, is your soul possessing you, or are you possessing your soul? That's really what he's saying. Is if you're patient, if you have a cheerful endurance, you're going to keep your soul in check, and you're going to keep those emotions in check. And you're not going to live by your feelings. You're going to live by facts and live by the truth, God's word. All right, let me read something to you here. Imagine that you are a world-class concert pianist at the peak of your career, someone who has spent years studying and practicing to develop your art. Your fingers respond instantly to your mental commands, flitting along the keyboard with grace and speed. Then one day you feel a stiffness that wasn't there before. You go to a doctor, tests are done, and the diagnosis comes back: arthritis. Your fingers are destined to become wooden and crippled. From the heights of success and playing, you will plunge to oblivion. It happened to Byron Janis. Within a short time, this concert pianist saw arthritis quickly spread to all his fingers, and the joints of 9 of them fused. Some people would have never recovered from such a blow, but Janis decided to fight back. He kept his ailment a secret from all but his wife and 2 close friends. He worked long hours to change his technique. He learned how to use what strengths he had instead of concentrating on his weaknesses. He also used a regimen of medications, acupuncture, and ultrasound to deal with the pain. His wife learned how to give him therapeutic massages to loosen his stiff joints. Through hard work and sheer determination, Janis was able to continue his career. He maintained a full concert schedule for 12 years without anyone suspecting. Finally, he told the world at the White House concert in 1985. I believe he's still living. He's in his 90s now, still plays the piano even. He credits faith and hope and will for his success. And he said this is what stood out. He said, "I have arthritis, but it doesn't have me." And it's interesting, have you heard of his name before, anybody? Byron Janis. He's from Keysport, Pennsylvania, so close to home here. But I thought that was interesting, and it kind of reminds me of this passage, that in your patience possess your souls, that we all are going to deal with things in life, but we got to keep our emotions, we got to keep ourselves in check. We got to recognize these are from God, that the Lord's in control, and maintain joy through all of it, and don't let those things overpower us. And I think that the Lord can really help us with this. So how about a quick, we're going to close out here. How about a quick maybe testimony of something you have gone through, maybe currently going through, maybe you know somebody else is going through something, and they have had the patience that Jesus talks about. They have cheerfully endured, and maybe just a quick testimony on this from anybody before we pray. Where
We should have this lesson before vacation moment.
yeah, it's great.
3 of those boys really taught my patience this week. And, but it was worth it all. It taught me something. And on the way home, I said to Rondo, man, told Lonzo in the beginning, I said, if you're behave tonight, I'll give you a red ticket, because he really, he went way out of his comfort zone to behave, and when the other boys, every wanted something, he would look at me. And on the way home, I said, Lonzo, I love you. Lonzo said, if they look at you, you love me? I said, yeah, I like you, Mom. I was never told I was loved. So I met my wife. She probably told me when I was what, 17?
Yeah, I didn't know if you'd come back on Thursday night or not after this.
It was much better Thursdays. Even Sarge did much better. Yeah. But they only have another,
Right.
at home, you know, they do whatever they want. Lonzo, you can see him anywhere in Howard Project. Maybe out on the road, he might be turning. And he's always alone.
These are kids that come on the bus. Yeah, what did you have the last 24 that on there?
26.
26 on the bus, so yeah. Single, most of them single parent homes and right in our backyard. Yeah, it with kids, you know, especially when they're not your kids and you're very limited on discipline. Boy, that can try the patience. You can lose the joy real quick in that, but it is worth it, and that's what we have to focus on. And you don't know what these kids are getting, even the little ones. They'll look back on BBS. I remember, you know, Mr. Larry saying he loved me. Those teachers teaching about the foundation. And, you know, it is God's word will not return void. Anybody else have a testimony for you, Fred? If not, let's go to the Lord in prayer and ask God to help us to follow this command of Christ here in your patience, possession of your souls. Lord, we thank you that you know the end from the beginning. And Lord, we are grateful that the signs we're seeing around us should not alarm us, but excite us, because it means that the coming of Christ is that much closer. And Lord, I pray that we would settle in our hearts, that we would have faith and confidence, knowing, Lord, that you will equip us for whatever lies ahead. You give us the words and wisdom. Lord, I pray for the peace and the patience that's needed. Lord, this is a personal matter. You speak of our patience and our souls. Start with us. And Lord, we are to be the spiritual leaders. This is the Strong Men's Bible Study. And there are many around us that are looking to us to project confidence. And I pray, God, that we would do that. Help us to not lose the joy. Or it's not just enduring, but cheerfully enduring. Not just what we do, but how we do it. And Lord, there's times, if we're honest, when we have lost that joy. And I pray today to just be grateful for the sunshine and grateful for life and breath and family and friends and opportunities. Lord, may we not get caught up in all the details of the day. So many things that are beyond our control, and certainly things that frustrate us. We wish we could change. But Lord, help us just to be grateful for what we have. Enjoy every moment. Life passes quickly. Lord, we are just so thankful for the blessings of this past week, how you've helped us, what you taught us. Lord, as we turn the corner into Sunday and move toward the Lord's Day, I pray tomorrow will be a great time for us to worship you in our spirits. Lord, I pray that we would lift up the name of Jesus. Lord, help us not to get distracted with earthly temporary things. The temple was important, but Lord, it was the God of the temple that mattered. And we thank you for this building, this property. We do pray for the meeting this afternoon with the architect. You grant wisdom and lead us forward in those things. But may we always remember that buildings are just tools. It's not the goal of this ministry to have large facilities and impressive things like that, but just to please you and do your will. And we pray for these ones that got saved, that they grow in their knowledge of you, and others that need to lay the foundation. And we thank you for the blessing of being used in your ministry. thank you, Lord, that we can go through this life together. Thank you for the fellowship, the encouragement that we have. Thank you for the men of Lifeway, or just how you use these men to uplift me and others. Just grateful for that. Pray for those that could not be here. I know we have ones traveling today. Harry's traveling, plus being Captain, bringing back safely. Pray for Ronnie, have a good time with his family, and others, whatever they're into today, just meet their needs as well. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Scott, Nick, good to see you.
Thanks, guys. Be strong. Have a great day.
Have a great day. You too. Take care.